Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you find yourself at this point. We just want to welcome everyone and thank you for making time to come and listen to our Next Steps program. This is session number 4 and part 2. The last time we had a lot of questions and it is so excited, but we couldn't finish all of it. So that's what we are doing with this session. So I want to introduce you to everyone. We've got our co-host, Joe Lilo. Thank you very much for being with us once again. He's doing his side on that, sorry, just had it with me just now. But you've been part of us in such a long time. We really do appreciate your help and your effort. We've got our panelists here. Some of them are familiar to the guests and some not. We would like to share a short introduction with all of you. So ladies first, we've got Madeleine. She's part of Next Steps program for a while now. She is sharing that she enjoys country living in Calvinia, Northern Cape, married and also a mother and also a wonderful example. That's why we've got you on here, because the Lord is working through you and all the panelists today. Then we've got a guest, a new speaker with us, Corey Steenkamp. Thank you very much for being with us here. You from Barumbat, Bala, married also with a kid and another one coming on the way. Hope congratulations on that. Moved in the country living. It's over just 2 years now. So you've got some experience to share with all of us, and also busy with the fiber optic on the sides as well. Then we've got Paul Clicks. You've been with us the last time as well. Welcome to you. So from the Somerset West, married with 5 children. What a blessing. And also got a wonderful insight of what you're doing on your side with the business. So we are very happy to have you joining us once again. We've got Maiden Pretorius, once been with us, and he's been with Advent Hope Online for a while as well. Also been training with medical missionaries, and he's very busy on his side, also farming and sharing all his knowledge and what he's got on that side that the Lord has blessed him with, also married with beautiful kids in KZN. I hope that all of you feel welcome. My name is Marlene from Advent Hope Online, and we are going to start with our first questions. Like we just shared on the screen, please make sure that your mics is closed at all time, unless we talk to you as a panelist or hostess or co-host. We really appreciate your assistance. It's just to make it life easier when we do communicate using the chat box, if you're a listener, to save up time to make sure we can go through all these wonderful questions that we've had from the public. So we're going to ask Joe for the first question. He's going to start with number 5. Then we can take it from there. Thank you very much, Joe. You still muted, Joe.
Right, I'm just trying to pick up question 5 on my cell phone quickly. Maureen, just
I can go on with it. It's okay.
Go with it. I'll find it now. Okay.
No problem. So we're starting with question number 5, and we've got it as what are the healthcare facilities like, and what alternatives are there for people with chronic conditions? And this is a question that I think anyone got the pressure of us answering it. Please, if there's 2 people would like to answer that question for us, really appreciate it.
Yes, Marlene. Hi. It's, this is a question which I think most people grapple with, and it is something to be concerned about, because we do live out in the country where obviously the hospital systems are not what they claim to be. The health systems, they do sometimes fail you out in the country. But we have an amazing body that the Lord has given us. And I don't want this to turn out to be a complete health talk, but we need to start understanding how our body works, because if we understand how this works, we understand what we need to do, even while we're still in the cities preparing to go out. Our bodies were made to heal themselves. And something that I have discovered lately, and it has been astounding, is to see that most illnesses, whether you start getting diabetes, whether you start getting high blood pressure, any one of these diseases, it actually starts with a nutrient deficiency. And most people are nutrient deficient. So if they start increasing their nutrients, and I'm talking about things like greens. Greens are what most people don't want to eat, but that is the stuff that they need. It makes your body alkaline. It removes toxins out of your body. It's one of the aids. And putting in the greens, kale is your first go-to. It's your highest mineral content food. And I find that people's bodies heal so quickly and they stay healthy. We've got this unbelievable onslaught of toxins in this world today. Everything is toxic, whether it's being sprayed in the air, whether it's sprayed on our food, whether it's coming in the water, whether it's coming in the cleaning stuff that you've got around you. There's this huge onslaught. And if we're going to survive, whether we're already out or whether we're planning on going out, we need to up the nutrients in our body tremendously. So I think this would be a fantastic spin-off to actually give, teach people how to do this, because this is vitally important. We don't get sick that often. And when it happens, it's very seldom and far between. If it is, I can't remember the last time I was ill. But it comes down to nutrients and understanding your body. And that's actually, I think, where we all need to start. And that would really make a huge difference to the fearfulness that people have of leaving the cities when it comes to health, because you understand you have health. And the other thing is you've got to learn what plants you can use for medicine. So that's very important too.
Can I add here, Marlene?
Yes, madam.
When my wife and I were called to go to Zambia as missionaries, one of the big things that people, even family members, pointed out to us that we're going to die there. What are we going to do there? We're going to die from malaria and whatever diseases. And God called us there. He told us to go, and we left it in His hands. And I will then add to what Madeleine is saying, as I think we can speak this whole afternoon just on health, following the health principles. That's just as we got into the health reform message. And so we had it in Zambia for 12 and a half years. And I can tell you now, we had a clinic there on the campus. My name or my wife's name is not on those books. God carried us through the 12 and a half years, and I understand there are people that is insulin dependent, for instance. So when we move to the country, you have to consider also what are the nearest places to you, where are hospital facilities in case of emergencies and things like that. My first route is, of course, prevention of disease, eat as healthy, live as healthy as possible. But if there are people that are for now dependent on certain drugs or whatever conditions they have, they want to consider, see where you are, but eventually make the decision to move away from dependence on those substances so that you can live according to what God is saying. It is very important that we understand that it's interesting. If you study the health message, you study true education, you study the coming out of the cities, it's all a package that God has given us. All these things go together. And we need to make sure that, we come out of the cities for the right reasons. And number one, that we follow these principles that God has given us in these last days. And the window for medical missionary work is busy opening in the world. We need to understand it, and we also need to be able to help others with it and practice it ourselves.
So we just wanted to ask if we can all ask everyone to mute their mics, just to make it easier for our discussion and questions, please. Before we go over to our next question, it was good. So we got you all fired up and wondering what's the next question. If we can close our eyes and open in prayer, please. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for blessing us and for bringing us together with these questions to ask what we can understand, what we can learn, and what we can do in our lives to better it, to get all this out to people around us for country living. You know exactly what's going to be the plans and what we need to learn from it. We ask you to open up our hearts and our minds so that we can understand it, and the questions that we had that would be answered. And if there's more questions, let us come to you and ask for the questions to be answered. We thank you, Lord, for all the panelists and everyone listening. We ask that you will bless them and guide them. And thank you, Lord, for opening up another opportunity for us to learn, to honor, and to love you. Amen. So we're going to go over to another question. If there's anyone wanting to add on to that question we just had. Okay. So we're going to ask, how important is infrastructure, roads, water, electricity, and what should we look out for? So if I can ask Corey, if you would mind to share a bit about that, if it's okay with you, your opinion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, in this instance, this all depends on like myself, which still needs to run a business in the background. Infrastructure, roads, and so forth is quite important, and especially your transport in that case. We've got a terrible road, so if you should try and come with a little car and work off from this location and do the rest, either it's still ministry and trying to reach out to people, or trying to do your business and attend meetings in a big city, it's very time consuming. So you need to have the right vehicle. But then again, you don't want also your place to be too accessible. That's what we looked for. So we didn't want a nice tar road up to your front door, trying to limit people to come in for crime, etc. Especially if you got still stuff like what do you call it, sheep and so forth, cattle or whatever. So you want to minimize your roads towards yourself for people to access you in that instance. But in the next case, we are trying to get on a little a little place for healthcare and so forth and on another piece of ground I've got close by. And then obviously it's quite important that the people can reach that as well and be helped there. So that's just from my point of view and that what I've experienced.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else on the panel that wanted to share, one of the panelists?
I think, welcome, Paul, you can go. Sorry.
Okay, Marlene, yeah, thanks. I think that question will vary very much from person to person, because you've got the person who's used to outdoor life, very capable, they can survive far out there. But I think one of the things you must keep in mind is when you get a place, put it in your mind that you're going to be accessing that place for the next 10, 20 years. Because, you know, sometimes we get a place out and we think, you know, a lot of people have been put fear that, you know, the Lord's coming in a year or 6 months or a short period of time. And so they think very short term of where they get their place. And I think what you must do is you must think long term. So will I be happy to have this place for the next 10, 20 years? Is the access all right? Can I live life for the next 10, 20 years in this location? Because, you know, when you think the crisis is going to hit in 6 months and it doesn't hit in 6 months and the crisis only comes in 5 years' time, you can wear yourself out. And, you know, that's something I think one must be careful with. You know, think of it long term, don't think of short term. Thanks.
Myron, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, I just want to mention about the water and electricity and so forth. Of course, I think all of agree that you need to have a source of water. That is basically you can get out of a borehole for free or close to a stream with nice clear water and so forth, good water. That is very, very important. You know, a person can still live without electricity. You know, if you're really a bush guy, you know, you can live without it. But there's some certain people that want to move slowly from the city and still have maybe some luxuries. But as I said before, try to learn to scale down from a city living to country living as much as possible. And if you can afford it, start with a small solar system. You know, you can always build on today's solar systems. You can build on more batteries, more panels and things like that. Start small. You have some electrical source for lights, charging, whatever, maybe Wi-Fi, things like that. If you still have to do work, still have to promote your ministry or whatever you do. But water is very essential in a case of that.
Thank you very much. We're going to... Yes, Madeleine?
I just want to add to that as well, because, you know, we all need to survive on food. So you need water. you really have to make sure that you have sufficient water to plant with. And when you start looking after yourself, you realize it can't only be a trickle of water, because you need to water maybe fruit trees, you need to water your vegetable gardens, it's all stuff like that. And you've got to understand that you've got to have infrastructure to be able to move the water around on your farm. Yes, you can build little channels and do flood irrigation, but that means you have to have a lot of water to do flood irrigation. So these are things one has to consider, that you need articulation as well, as just a source of water. So that's very important that we think a little bit further on those lines. And yeah, another thing on the electricity, I won't forget, I initially had a very small little system here. So I couldn't really do a washing machine. So I was doing stuff by hand. And I promise you, it wasn't fun. Initially, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to live out in the cities and this is what it's going to be like. And then after the third time, you have to scrub the bedding by hand, and you trample it in the bath, and you lug that heavy stuff out. It isn't fun anymore. It's exactly what Paul says. You've got to think long term. It's fun for a short period of time. You can do it for so long, but then you realize there's more important things to do than taking the whole day just to do washing, especially when you're growing your own food. So it's important. We need to start looking at, sources of energy as well. That is very, very important.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We're going to hand over to Joe for the next question.
Yeah, I just want to end with this last question, saying that property prices are very large dependent on water supply. So in other words, if you're in the eastern part of the country, you have plenty of water, you're going to be paying a higher price for your property. Where California and those type of places are, that's going to influence the price of your property. So when you take it, it's as everyone's mentioned, it's a long-term thing. So yeah, let's just remember that was one of our main comments is it's difficult to afford it, and if you're going to an area with a lower rainfall, you're going to have to drill deeper for a borehole and etc. So just take that into consideration. Okay, our next question is, and it's joins on with this one. What natural end security hazards should you consider? So this is rainfall, as I've said. Are you prone to droughts? Are you prone to high winds and that sort of stuff? So if people can come in and just give us some information what you have to consider on looking at the natural environment around you.
I see Paul had his hand up. Maybe he wanted to comment.
I just wanted to comment on the question of electricity on the property. I actually think if you are looking at a property, don't worry about Eskom. You must go solar. You must look at solar is definitely the way to go. And, in the past, that was always a big factor on buying a property. But solar has become incredibly cheap. The prices are going down. Even this last month, prices went down on batteries. So it's becoming more and more accessible. And with Eskom in its point of collapsing, and so, we have so much power cuts on where our farm is. Our neighbor is really battling to keep up with all his watering as well. And it's actually a bit of a crisis. A friend of mine who's in the irrigation thing told me that the farmers are not planting because they can't pump enough water because they're all dependent on Eskom. So when you're looking at, I don't think Eskom is a deciding factor on a property, and in some ways it may even be a benefit because often you'll get that piece of land cheaper. But then just, do your calculations and definitely look at going solar. I don't know, I think it's a wonderful way for us to get out into the country and to be independent. Thanks.
Yes, Myron.
I want to answer or partly answer question number 7. I think if you're looking for property, you need to understand the situation of South Africa, which comes to the next question as well. But I mean, naturally, you're not going to try to get a property next to a location or where there is a high security risk, things like that. If you know that area is a risk area specifically, I mean, you're not going to try to get a piece of land that side. But then the climate is very important, as Joe was saying. You need to know. I see the earthquakes here in the world, and some people on an earthquake line and things like that. You need to know these type of things. Are you in a tornado area? You're in an area where there's a lot of hail. You know, what is the rainfall and so forth and so forth. Where are you building your house? Is it on a slope? Is it in a valley? If it rains a lot, are you too close to a river? Whatever the winds, we have a lot of wind here in Gelukberg. We luckily, or maybe it was the Lord's providence, I believe, that we started building in the windy season here in Gelukberg. So, and the winds are really blowing, like the southeaster there in Cape Town. And so we had to fortify, strengthen our homes, our roofs and things like that, you know, just to make sure we don't sleep the next day without a roof on our heads. So yeah, your climate is very, very important, considering, because you want to plant your vegetables, you want to plant your fruits, what kind of fruit you like and stuff like that is very, very important to consider. Yes.
Myring, I want to add to that, because it depends on where you purchase. I mean, in some areas there's sufficient rainfall that you wouldn't have to necessarily put in irrigation and stuff like that. Whereas in the drier areas we are in, it's vitally important. And then also looking at where you want to purchase. You know, this is one of the things that if I had left the decision, or if the decision had been left to me to go and purchase a place, I would have looked at places that were green always, where the rainfall was high, where I could plant anything and it would grow. But God has a specific place that he wants to put each and every one of us. And once again, I want to go back to the point that we have to put these things in the hands of God. We have to ask the Lord where he wants us. Because sometimes we see things out of our viewpoint, but we have not consulted the Lord. We have taken it upon ourselves to do this. And we often don't see things which the Lord has foreseen, which could happen there in the future. So we need to take this with faith and ask the Lord, and we have to surrender that which we thought was dear to us and say, Lord, I give it to you. I take whatever you have installed for me, and I will accept that. And that to me is a vitally important part in finding and looking for ground and looking for spaces to live.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot. And I just want to round this question saying that one also has to consider wider than just your house and producing food. For example, where Myron lives, your rainfall is probably over 1,000 millimeters a year and very high in summer. So Myron has had to put up tunnels because you want to control the environment. Otherwise, your rainfall is too high and you're getting too many fungal diseases and problems like that. Where Mother Lane is, they have very cold winters, so you have to look at different crops, putting in frost cover or possibly also a tunnel. So, and then if you go to area where you have high heat, then you're going to have to look at putting up shade cloths to grow certain crops. So each area you're living in, just to live and produce food, you have to consider your natural environment. Paul, would you like to add something before we move forward?
Yeah, you know, the problem is the perfect property is very populated. So you're going to find the places that have everything. They're beautiful, they're green, they got the rainfall, they got the weather. You're going to find high population because that's where people are going to go to. If you want a place that's remote and also safe, because the more farmers there are, the more laborers there are, the more workers, the more crime. If you're going to look for safety and security, you're going to end up having to look at places where it's more challenging to live. And then you've got to make that decision. Are you able to survive out in there? You know, don't go in there blindfolded. But we're going to have to learn to survive in areas that are less inhabited. If you look at the Waldenses, they went into places that were not very well inhabited. And so, but what you've got to do is you've got to go into it with open eyes, knowing what's in that area, and decide whether you're willing to live with those consequences, like Joe was saying now, putting up shade net, doing these sort of things. And I must say, in the day and age we live, we're actually very privileged because infrastructure, piping, shade netting is cheaper than it's ever been. I mean, to actually put infrastructure in today is actually relatively cheap compared to what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, because of mass production and all these things. Thanks.
All right, so our next question is, crime in rural areas in South Africa is violent. What should one consider before moving to the countryside? Now, one of the questions on the chat box that has come in is about land claims as well. So I'd like to add this in as well, because land claims is part of the thing that goes on. I would just like to say from my side, because we have a land claim on the property where we are, and basically the South African government has run out of money, and most of the land claims have been processed, so it's still a problem. And if you get a good lawyer, you get lawyers who specialize in that field, and they can give you advice pretty well before you go into it. One of the things is that a seller has to disclose any land claims and any information like that. So if we could go on with the crime and what you consider in that as well. Maybe, Corey, you could come in, because you also in one of the areas of the country where we've had a lot of farm murders.
Yeah, specifically on the land claims, you should always be willing to also listen to the people. Yeah, my English is not too good, but if I can put it that way, moenie harregat wees nie. That's the only word I can quickly think of. We had an instance here with us. The guys pitched up. It was about 5 or 6 cars, full of people, lots of noise, and just pulling the right guy to the side, saying, listen, yeah, we understand. What is your needs? Yeah, sure, 100%. You had a house here. Which part? Obviously, most of the farms has been split up. So we're on Elandsfontein, and it's got few sections of that, which ended up on the neighboring farm. But it's as Silk, it's the whole farm that they want. But then going deeper into it and making them feel comfortable, they over-chatted, and it ended up they never buried someone here. They never owned it. They just used to work there and have a house there. So they've put a lot of nonsense in a claim towards, they wanted land claim and they lived here and whatever. But as soon as the inspectors that was with them heard the over conversation of them saying, listen, yeah, they never used to own it. Their dad was just a worker here. That put them on the back foot immediately. So the guys, it's not like they're unfair, but if you're willing to listen and just dig a little bit deeper, and obviously, as Madeleine said in a previous thing, give it over in the Lord's hands, praying, doing these things, praying, the Lord gives you insight on how to handle it. And if I may just fall back quickly on a back question, which I wanted to say is, when you purchase land, make sure, if can, test the water. Take it away, get it tested. Don't just take anyone's word for that the water is good to do agriculture and for drinking and for so on. Take a sample, get it tested, and put your mind at ease so that you know what you're dealing with. You can do the same with existing gardens or whatever. Take some of the soil and get it tested. Otherwise of that, you create your own soil, and especially in tunnels and so forth.
All right, so I'd just like to come in here if nobody else is coming in. Mayden, I see you opened your mic. Would you like to add something?
Yes, I want to say something here that we need to understand, is that where in this world are we safe? We cannot go anywhere. We live in a very, very difficult world, especially this time of Earth's history, and especially here in South Africa, we're all worried about what is happening, violence and things like that. So yeah, I would agree with Corey and Madeleine and Paul. We need to make it a prayer thing, that God will guide us. And if we follow all the steps as God is leading us and then give us a piece of land, we need to trust him that this is where we need to be. Whatever is going to happen, God will keep his protection over us. So he will guide us in those circumstances. But you have to keep your eyes and ears open as well. What's happening around? Ask people questions. When you get into the area, ask as many questions as you can, if it's possible. But please, we need to put that in prayer. The thing is like this. I see three stages, possible three stages in what's happening in the future. Number one is the local circumstances in South Africa. You know, if there's a lockdown or there's a riots or whatever it may be in South Africa, you are out there, you can provide for yourself for a length of time or period of time. That is not necessarily the little time of trouble. Then there's a stage where Ellen White talks about getting to the country because we need to provide for ourselves. That's when we go into a persecution stage. And this is not the stages where we need to hide on our farms. That's the time to proclaim the gospel. So Paul and Silas and those people were not afraid to preach the gospel and to be persecuted and whatever. We're not hiding from those circumstances. That's the time we preach the gospel. And then, of course, it's the time of trouble after the close of probation and things like that. So we have different stages, things that can happen. And in the first stage, we just need to ask God, you know, take us to a place where he seems best, where he will protect us. He knows the best places in South Africa. We don't. But with that, ask questions and make sure you're following every step as God is leading to those places.
Madeleine, will you come in? I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, you know, we were just discussing this earlier today, that counsel from Ellen White was to be at least 2 hours horse ride out of town. Now, 2 hours horse ride is actually 40 kilometers. And if you think about it, 40 kilometers is, if you're walking at, let's say, 5 kilometers an hour, that's an 8-hour walk out of town. That will discourage a lot of people from walking to wherever your property is. But 40 kilometers is quite doable within a vehicle. It takes half an hour at 80 k's an hour. So look at something a little bit further out of town, and especially where there are no too many seasonal workers. When seasonal workers are around, they don't tend to move out the area, they stay there. And that creates high amounts of crime. And we really need to take a look at that, because I just see how some of the smaller towns have great issues of crime because of the seasonal workers that have nothing to do between the seasons of picking. So just be aware of that when you're looking at property, and look at something 40 kilometers, round about that out of town. It's doable. People can reach you easily. It's not like they've got to do a day's travel to reach you. But it is a discouragement to those who can walk from the closest town. They're not going to walk for 8 hours to come here and find there's nothing to walk 8 hours back.
Okay, thanks very much. We have to still be aware and realize that farm murders are on the increase, and it's very high. There was a tragic one this last weekend just down the road where I am now. I'm in Heidelberg today, and Standerton, they had one. And this is where it's important, because we keep touching on this one about evangelizing. So that is where you, as a person moving into a new area, must evangelize, because most of the farming communities have a radio call system or a cell phone call system where you're in with each other, you're looking after each other. My problem in my area, which has come up in the last month or two, is that they're wanting to put up a whole lot of wind turbines in our area to create electricity for Eskom. All those farmers the last 2 weeks have been targeted by fire. We had 5 fires yesterday, 3 fires today. the blacks have heard us, and they're trying to drive us off our farms now so they can get the land so that they can get good money income from putting up wind turbines. So, and we're running around, right, beating fires all day, every day. So, moment you are in a community, get to know your neighbors, be on the radio call system. You have to join the farmers union, all that type of stuff, and be a witness and pray for each other. I'm so new in the community, so it's very difficult for me in knowing people who've lived there second and third generation. But one of the best times to get your community is at a funeral, and we're having probably, and most of it is old age, at least once a month, a funeral in the area. So if you move into a new area and you want to get your neighbors and get to know them well, one way is find a good neighbor and he will tell you who everybody else is, and attend the funerals so people get to know who you are and why you're in the community. And if you know you're a good Christian person, they're going to reach out to you. I've had so many witnessing chances because the people know I'm a deep Christian. Maureen, you can go with the next question. We have no other comments.
If it's okay, I'm going to combine the next questions 9 and 10, because I think it would be great if we have all our opinions in one day. How far away from a major town or city should we move? And is cell phone reception and internet connection important? So we're combining those two questions. If you would mind to answer that, anyone on the panelists can answer that for us, please.
While answering that question, Marlene, I can just jump in here also what Joe was saying is that I can testify. We moved to Geluksburg and we made friends with black and white. We have good neighbors, we have black neighbors, we have white neighbors and so forth. And they look after each other. They care for each other. And us being in medical missionary work, treating people that are sick, our neighbors come to us for treatment. So you build up the relationship, and they will eventually stand by your side. They will help you in these circumstances as well. So it's good to be in touch with your neighbors. It's very important. On the issue of away from, how far away, Madeleine, I'm not sure. Did you mean horsepower? 2 hours horsepower?
Yes.
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
By horseback, yes. 2 hours by horseback. Get on your horse and ride for 2 hours.
Yes.
Not flat out, so it will last. Don't take all the energy out the first.
It's not in the saddle in the car that you're meaning. You know,
no, it's in the saddle. It's in the saddle. But I that works out to 40 kilometers.
I think we can apply the same principle just in terms of a vehicle nowadays. You know, how far you travel and how fast you can travel and what the roads are like and how fast you can get to a place. I can just remember in Lusaka, the Adventist clinic started about, I think it's say more or less 10 kilometers out of Lusaka city. And when we arrived there the first time, when we did mission work in 1996, I think 97, the clinic was still somehow away from the city. But then we moved, after 7 years, we moved to Zambia, and that clinic was completely engulfed in the city of Lusaka. It's now in the middle of a compound. So yeah, a person needs to consider the extension of a city, you know, which side is extending and so forth, so that you don't, eventually city comes to you, you're thinking of moving away from the city. So I think an hour's drive is probably more accurate nowadays to get away from the city. And so forth. But on the cell phone and things reception, it's important to have cell phones still today. I think while technology is there, use it. If you can use it for security, for work purposes, for whatever communication purposes, it is important to have that type of thing. If you're alone out there with no communication, nothing whatsoever, it's more risky. Until we have those facilities, why not use it appropriately?
Okay, we've touched on our question 11 about the claims in South Africa. Joe, you wanted to mention something before we go over to the next question?
Yes, I just want to bring in, it's basically what expanding on what Paul said, times are changing very fast in South Africa, and the latest one is internet connection via satellite for farmers. It's become very cheap and very able, and they're marketing it a lot now. So one doesn't only have to look at cell phone towers. What's happened in our specific area, crime has caused that they keep destroying and stealing equipment and batteries, etc., in cell phone towers. So there around me, probably 60% of the cell phone towers are not in operation anymore because of vandalization and theft. But one option is, and as Paul says, technology is moving so fast forward that you can look at a satellite option, and it's very cheap at the moment and much available. Paul, would you like to come in quickly? I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm what you were saying about the cell phones. We've been on our farm for 12 years now, and we don't have any cell phone reception. We've relied on radio, Wi-Fi, but now we've got satellite, and it's very cheap. So wherever you are, doesn't matter where you go, you can get satellite installed, and it's really not expensive at all. And then you can do your Wi-Fi and your internet access and that sort of thing. Just on safety and location and distance and that sort of thing, I will say one thing, that if you do want to have a country property, in other words, a fairly large piece of property where you live in, the country lifestyle, if you are close to a city, you are going to need a lot of money for security. That is a reality. As soon as you're close to a city, you're going to have to start putting up things like electric fences. You're going to have to have armed response and that sort of thing. And that's one of the challenges of being close in. So when you go further out and you put in a physical barrier, and when it comes to security, I want to tell you now, the best barriers in security are physical barriers. The old concept of the moat, where you've got a water surrounding the distance, is a great deterrent for theft and for crime, because of accessibility, etc., etc., etc. So if you're close in, you're gonna have to put a lot of money into security to secure your property. That's one of the things that I think you need to look at. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go over to number 12. Is that okay? Just wanted to see if there's anyone wanting to make a note. Are there areas identified as more ideal for country living in South Africa? Any suggestions that you can share of places that you know? I see, Corey, you unmuted. You wanted to share something there.
Just on the previous question regarding the safety and so forth, one of the very important things is, if you don't patrol your property, someone else will. So make sure you're visible and you're moving around. Make sure that your routine is not the same every day. That is of utmost importance, that you find in most cases, to make sure patrol and be visible. If you're visible and your hours is not the same, there's a lesser chance of people entering your property. Obviously, once people, it's hard times, and I've also been, I don't know if you can call it privileged, but to be on the front side of the looting when that happened right in front of our doorstep. And yeah, once it gets to that stage, then there's just no turning back. Then in good dogs is actually also quite a nice barrier for people, just to leave you alone and make sure your property is harder to get into than the next oaks. But yeah, when it gets to the really hard times, there's nothing really you can do.
Paul, you wanted to share something? I see your hand is risen up.
Yeah. I think there are definitely safer places. Listening to the other panel discuss and patrolling, I've never ever thought of patrolling my property ever. We're up on the West Coast, Glen William, Calvinia, those sort of areas. And I just want to reiterate the point again. The places that are safe are going to be difficult to survive in. They're going to be hard places to live, like Calvinia, William, where we are, we're on a river. We got a very beautiful piece of property, but everywhere around there, it's desert. It makes it very hard for people to survive. That's where you're going to find the most secure areas because of the difficulty of surviving. And so you've got to weigh that off against what you are willing, how much difficulty you're willing to put up for security, and vice versa, So yeah, definitely I would say out on the west coast of South Africa, that's very secure if you're looking for security wise. Thanks.
Madeleine, I see you wanted to share with us.
Yes, I want to agree with Paul, because where we are, we don't have any security issues whatsoever. The biggest security issue we have is baboons. Baboons come and they steal your fruit. So these are realities, as Paul says, the more the place is sought after, the more you're going to find issues. But we have, and look at the other aspect. I know all my workers' family. They don't allow strange people to come in, but there are no strange people because it's too far and it's too hot and it's too dry. There's no water between my farm and town. There is nothing. So they can't stop and get water if they want to walk. There is, I would say, a lot of things to consider, but definitely one of them is to consider, as Paul says, the drier areas. But I do find safety in that as well, because we can walk for kilometers and you'll find absolutely nobody around. Whereas the more densely populated areas, you constantly have to patrol, and we have no fear, absolutely no fear. We don't have crime. We don't have any of that. Well, we don't know for how long, but up to this point, we've been very, very, I would say, blessed not to have any of those concerns or worries. So if you're looking for a property and you don't already have one, or there's no family property somewhere, look for an area that is drier. That's exactly what Paul has said. I agree with him.
All right. So we're trying to move a bit forward on the questions and get through them. And so 12 and 13, we're going to combine and say, are the areas identified, which is better for country living? And what can I do if I cannot afford to live in the country? Would anybody like to come in and give some advice over there? Corey, maybe you can come in over here, because when you're staying, it's a whole group family thing that's happening on your side. So maybe give us some information how you people looked at it and what's your way forward, because there are some people who have invested with you guys but are still living in the cities hoping that they can come and join you on the farm. So just give us some background how your system's working there in Warmwell.
Yeah, this is quite a difficult question. I actually, there's some friends over from Moinoi side, and we earlier had a little discussion on that, and I said which actually would be great if there was sort of like, if the Seventh-day Adventist people sort of had an expo meeting where they invited Myring, Paul, Marlene, etc., and you identify yourself with people you can, how can you put it? Wat jy mense saam jou kan skaar. What do you call it? You can people you can relate to and can work with. Because let me tell you something, you can't work with anyone. We may have the same beliefs and we may have the doctrines and everything and all of that. We believe exactly the same thing. But when it comes to work and the tough times, hey, you're going to have some people frustrating you. So that is a very fine line on how to choose who you would let on to, if you're privileged enough to have a big enough piece of land to give away even and give to people. You'll be the guy managing them. So as soon as we started with this whole thing, I got in a lawyer and said, listen, what is your feel on this? What do you think? And so on. Because people are always great, and when they need, they are very friendly. The best foot is forth. And then it comes to the trouble time where you need to put in your efforts, put in a bit of sweat, work a bit, do your part, and then all of a sudden you're not so keen on that. You don't do your chores. How do you get rid of the person? And then it's a whole Christian thing, taking a knock. So instead of being a help, you actually being a hurdle for someone, because now you want to get rid of them, get them off the farm. As Paul said, we sometimes look at this, like myself, after being through a hijacking, being through the looting in short periods of time after each other. We said, hey, this looks like a good time, and the child's is on his way. Let's make a prayer situation out of this and get out of the country. And the Lord provided. And we had a short view, a short time. What do you call it? Like Paul said, a short vision, not the long 10-year vision. And so we found ourselves in a bit of a penury at one stage, but being adaptable and can get along with the situation, we made it work. And so my dad and everyone is here, and we have some other people that helps with the tunnels and the work on the farm and so forth. But very important is getting to know someone before you let them onto your property. And obviously the guy wanting to come to the property, make sure you know who you want to go to. It's a very difficult thing to make the people work on one to have one vision and work on that. Very difficult, just my point of view.
All right.
Could I come in?
Yes, go ahead, Madeleine. Thanks.
I've actually got my daughter and son-in-law living with me on the farm. And, if you've got family members that you can work together, I would say that's the easiest way to have more people on the farm than to have people who you think you know, but you don't really know. So I would say if you can and you don't know how to do this, start talking to your family. Talk as a family group together and move out together. You need a lot of hands on farms. And when you've got more people together, it's more skills, a greater skill set. You can do more things without having to employ anybody else or actually pay other people to come in and do things on your farm. So it's very important that you actually increase your skill set. But yes, I would say stick to family, or if you've known the people for years, maybe that'll work. I don't know. But for now, I wouldn't just take in strange people. Well, not strange, but people that I'm not sure about on my farm. As Corey said, it's very difficult to actually now tell people they've got to leave. They've decided to come and move to the farm and live there and put down roots, and it's not working. It becomes a very, very difficult situation.
Paul, you wanted to share something?
Yeah, look, this is a big topic, like everyone's been saying. But I just want to say, if you get the wrong people on your property, it's way worse than being alone. Rather be alone than get the wrong people onto your property, because your life will become hell. Your property will not be attractive because it's going to be a place of contention and fighting. And instead of being a refuge, which country living is supposed to be, it's supposed to be a refuge. You will not want to go to your property anymore because you've got this feud going on between you and some other people. So be very, very, very careful. And, on this note, I'd just like to say, if you're going onto someone else's property, don't build infrastructure on someone else's property. Protect yourself. And if you're a property owner, also look out for, let's say someone does come to your property, look out for them. In other words, say to them, look, I don't want you to build on my property. Bring in a mobile home. If something goes wrong, we can part as friends. You take your home away, you go, and there's no hard feelings. This is a really, really, because many of the failures that we have in the Christian experience all revolve around partnerships and wrong people on the farm. And that's why a lot of these things fell through. Most of the very few failures happened where individual people went out. And yes, it's lonely and you want others on your farm. I mean, we know the feeling. But if you're going to make the wrong choice in that area, it's going to be way worse than being a little bit alone. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're almost coming to our end of our time. I just want to add 2-3 things over here, and it all depends where you are. The question has come up to especially old people. How can you move into the country? There are positions for being caretakers on farms. I know my area where I'm near Dahlstrom, there's a lot of trout farming. A lot of our neighbors also have a bit of game, but then that means you normally have to work on a Sabbath, which you normally have visitors on your property on a Sabbath. One would have to explain to the people. I was very lucky where I'm working now. The owner of the farm has a Orthodox Jew friend, and he knew about the Sabbath and how it's kept and why and etc. Even though he's not a Christian, he's an atheist. So there is ways of getting onto the farm. I'm here at St. Avon today, and Pastor Ernie Rex has just been preaching to us, and they've actually started a house church at Marlow Park. Madeleine, you always used to stop off at Marlow Park. And there were actually two neighbors keeping the Sabbath and didn't know that they were neighbors and Sabbath keepers, non-Adventists. So one of the ways of getting out of the city is possibly moving into a complex, something similar to Marlow Park. We're out in the country, next to the Kruger Park. It's beautiful nature, close to God. The cost of living over there isn't all that high. You 30 k's out of town with the security, etc. So there are other options of looking at ways. And as we've said, each time we have to pray about it. And one of the important things over here, and this is what us as Christians find very difficult to do, forgiveness. We have to learn. If we can't forgive somebody who's done something against us, we're not going to get into heaven. Forget it. God does not forgive us if we cannot forgive a neighbor or somebody's done something wrong to us. So maybe this is part of our Christian path and learning and preparing for the end times, is learning how to forgive properly. Madam, you and Paul have your hands up before we close off.
Yes, I just want to mention, I'm not understanding, we've spoken about getting people or helping people on our properties maybe that can't get out of the city. But if I understand the question correctly, it says, what can you do if you cannot afford to move to the country? I'm not quite sure if we've answered that question correctly, because I don't know, it didn't seem like there was the right answers, but maybe we can do it for the next time.
I think, Marion, that is a good question. And I think if you would mind to answer it, we got a few seconds left. Then if it's okay on your side to answer us with that. There's a lot of people that got this question in their thoughts as well.
For me, I just see wherever you are, doesn't matter if you're still in the city, you're still in a town. It's important for us to first pray about it, and we spoke about it, but do what is right at hand. That means start farming maybe in pots or whatever it may be. Start to learn to plant things and start looking around, and maybe there's a farm that you can look after, or a place you can move to that's vacant or whatever. Somebody wants you to look after a place, but as you're waiting for answers for the Lord, you can't afford something around you. Try to do what you can do at that specific point until God gives you open door to move further, I would say.
Paul, you wanted to share with that question? I see your hand is raising up.
Yes, we had friends that came to us on our farm. They stayed for a few months because they were inspired by wanting to do country living. He went into Cape Town. He wanted to do country living, and so he started up a business. And he saw he was losing his children, and he realized that the reality is, by the time he's made up enough money to buy a property, it's going to be too late. And so he gave up his idea of having a business and buying a property. He went out and he became a farm manager, and his children have had the privilege of living out on the farm, horse riding, plowing, doing everything out there in nature, and he saved his family. And I just want to say, land ownership is not the answer to country living. This obsession that we have to have our own place. If you're not able to do it, there are lots of options. You can work on farms, you can go to people, God will open a way, We don't need to see that the only way to get out into the country is to own a property. And I want to tell you that the world we're going into is a different world to what we've come from. Land ownership is not as secure as it used to be. We're moving into a very different world. And, you know, in some ways, if you don't have to own property and you can get out into the country, well, then I say that's a blessing. So, you know, keep your options open.
Before we go over to the next question, I see Madeleine, you wanted to share? You still muted.
Sorry. Most people that are around here with us, and most Adventists around here that are that have come out, they don't own their own farms. They all live on farms. Farmers around here, because a lot of people don't want to live on their farms anymore. They want to live in the cities for the convenience of or the nearest town. So they want somebody just to live on the farm, to make sure that the house is looked after, to water things around there. And they all have, you can go into a deal with them and say, can I have, you know, life rights on the piece of property? And most of them do not have an issue with that whatsoever. So they even go and do formal contracts so that they do have life rights. So they can use the garden areas, they can plant everything that they need to plant. It hasn't cost them anything. They don't pay anything to stay there. It costs them nothing. The only thing is that you have to make sure is that you have a source of income, because you're not going to be able to do it by sheep farming or whichever farming. It's not large scale farming. So you've got some source of income. If you're got enough money to survive off, that's fine. If you're doing internet work, it's even greater. It depends on what you're doing, but that is a very, very, very nice option for people who cannot afford to purchase property.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. We wanted to share a note with you. We will cover how to evangelize while in the cities in the future programs, and we'll have some spin-off programs for Next Steps programs. So please do not think we are missing on your questions. We will make sure that these questions will be answered. We've got a spin-off program tonight, Sabbath closing, Advent Hope Online. David Olsen will share part 2 with us. So please note that there will be spin-off programs regarding Next Steps. We just want to say thank you to all the people that was logged on and came onto the panel to come and listen, to share your questions, who filled in the survey. We could not do this without you. So we thank you all for your hard work, your effort, and your time. For the panelists as well, for you especially, thank you very much for opening up your time, your hearts, and your lives to come and help to clarify some of these questions that we've got. We really do appreciate it. We're looking forward to the next time. Please have a look at our website. We will make sure that you get notified in advance to come and see what's going to happen with Next Steps program. Unfortunately, we have to end now. We have another program going to happen just now. May all of you have a wonderful time. We're going to ask Joe if you would mind to close in prayer for us. Thank you very much.
Let's bow our heads. Our Lord and Heavenly Father, again, we thank you for this time of fellowship. We thank you that your Holy Spirit was here, because it's definitely not us answering, but guided by the Holy Spirit. We thank you also for the many people who come on later and watch us on YouTube, and keep inquiring. Be with us until we meet again. We pray and ask this in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone.